Hi, I'm Carrie Cassidy from Project Camelot. Today I'm going to talk about my latest interview with Captain Mark Richards of the Secret Space program. And I've had a delay because I went to Egypt with a group, and so this is coming in a bit late. I actually interviewed him in March, but I took very good notes and did some recordings right afterwards to make sure that the total recall, as I call it, is accurate. So here we go. Basically, when I first got there, we talked about the impact on him of some information that he was given that had to do with people had talked critically about him and myself, and also lied about him, didn't do their research, and so on. And he was given some information about that, how it occurs on the internet. This is commonplace for us that are part of this internet world, but for Mark, who has been in prison for over 30 years, he is not familiar with the internet culture, so to speak, and he doesn't know anything about avatars, how people can hide their identity and therefore act very badly. And that's really what's going on here. So that's important. And then as far as what I'm going to do is pull up my notes here. So he was actually very shocked by all of that. And I think that I assured him or reassured him that people do care about these interviews. I've got a lot of compliments on the interviews over the past, and so he was very happy to hear that. It's really quite interesting when someone has not been exposed to the internet culture to get their reaction to the way people behave. It's quite shocking, I have to say. And the bottom line, as I told him, is that his information really threatens the worldview of most people and their view of reality as it happens, and they simply can't handle it. So they lash out, trying to preserve their original view of what reality is all about. On the contrary to what Jack Nicholson says, I believe people can handle the truth. And it's just that there are a lot of people that are going through changes, and the shock factor is big when you have a very heavy duty programming in your life and so on. So then we talked about the prison conditions. He said he has very poor conditions where he is, and that there are a lot of older men who are sharing this space now in this lower security area where he's been moved to, with a lot of younger men who are quite crazy and should actually be in a mental ward. He became very ill when this first happened. Back in November of 2017, he was moved. And at that time, actually, I wanted to go see him shortly after that, but I was not allowed to because he was so ill. And on top of it, there is no heat where he was or is, and there are 16 toilets for 250 men. They're out in the open with no privacy. It's all very shocking after having been for 30 years in a cell that he shares with one other person. He says it's like a concentration camp. The guards and the administration behave like fascists. He has high blood pressure and requires medicine that the prison admin often forgets to give him. And he hasn't been to a doctor in a long time, even though he has a right to go to a doctor on a regular basis. And one of the things they're doing is dangling this carrot before the men who are moved in his situation into that sort of area, and making them tolerate degraded conditions, basically saying that if they'll tolerate it without complaint, they will be releasing them sometime soon. The reality is that a lot of those men are available for parole, and they are not allowing them to get parole, and this is part of the problem with the prison system. It's very antiquated and really barbaric. He believes he was put into these quarters to silence him, and he only feels that he's alive because of the hidden help from his friends, the Raptors. And keep in mind that he has an extended family, including his wife Joanne, that he loves, and this is why he tolerates the situation instead of leaving through a portal, which is actually could be facilitated for him. And so he is very dedicated to his wife and family. I asked him about the face-to-face threats he may be getting in this area. He said he doesn't have to worry about that because of the protection of the Raptors, but there are always more nefarious threats behind the scenes to his well-being. He also said that drugs are rampant in the prison and that illegal drugs are easily available. Most prisoners are on drugs, and this makes their judgment questionable. Living with groups of men in that state is always dangerous and puts everyone on edge. The guards are selling drugs to the inmates. This is common practice in federal prisons and rampant in the prison system. As far as arrests and tribunals offshore, he agrees this is happening and not being reported in the mainstream news. He basically says that military men are disappearing also. And this week, or the week that he was interviewed, he was talking about 2 Navy pilots who had disappeared in an F-18 event in Antarctica, and that they couldn't use a U.S. ship to approach the location due to the journalists who would report the incident. And so they hired an Argentine helicopter to go in and rescue some scientists who were attacked and probably saw something they were not supposed to see, and their minds were wiped before the news reporters got to them. And there was also a helicopter crash in Iraq. As a military man, Mark watches these kinds of events closely, and he does have access to a television. We talked a lot about Antarctica this time, and he said regarding Antarctica, there are multiple scenarios and multiple problems. He said the Nazis in New Berlin are still there, although he refers to them as fascists. He said, I think that's a fine distinction, but whatever. And the ruins of Atlantis are being revealed and studied by the U.S. and Russia. This is the last evidence of human alien civilizations, where humans and aliens were living together openly in a civilization on planet Earth. And the Nazis have been plundering it for years, he says. The Russians are now plundering Lake Vostok, and he says there's a melt-off revealing the main dome of the city buried under the ice there, and at most the ice will last another 5 to 10 years. There are multiple ET bases down there, he says. Ruins of Atlantis are there and basically being studied again by the U.S. and Russians, and that contains our true history. He says disease is a factor because of dormant or hidden viruses from ancient wars, and those are being revealed as the ice melts. They don't know how to deal with these viruses, can't cope with their release. I mentioned the Buzz Aldrin comet Face of Evil, and Mark thought he may be referring to the deadly viruses found down there. Admiral Byrd and the U.S. military attacked Antarctica, of course, and he called that a massive invasion. And regarding New Berlin, he said the fascists of New Berlin make up 1/3 of the fleets protecting planet Earth right now. So that's kind of a strange twist of fate, you might say. There is lots of contact between the Nazis in New Berlin and our government, and there are several 100,000 who are massively rich because of minerals from Antarctica. The fascists and reptoids and Draco want to weaken the U.S., and therefore they are causing dissension between U.S. and Russia. So he says the North Pole is also a stargate, that there are massive stargates at both poles, and those are the most energized vortexes on the planet. Regarding inner Earth, Mark thinks a lot of people are actually seeing into earlier versions of Earth when they view into the stargates at the poles. We talked about parallel Earth. I referred him to a new series that's out called I think it's on Stars, and it's called Counterpart, which is really like a Fringe, if you've ever seen that, on steroids. And he says you can get to parallel Earth via the stargates at the poles, but you also have to time travel due to the split that occurred when creating a parallel Earth. And this particular version of the creation of the parallel Earth and the time travel required is actually just like the storyline of Stars, which Mark has no access to and didn't know about. So that's quite fascinating. It sounds like perhaps the producers over at Counterpart are getting fed information from the secret government. Regarding parallel Earth, he says there's a split off at some point, and to get there you can't just slide, you have to also time travel. And he says when you split from one universe to another, it breaks off radically. It's not easy to return due to the quantum nature of the multiverse. There's a lot more going back and forth between parallel and this Earth than people realize. There are many UFOs that come from the future. Regarding the Trump administration, some people in the Trump administration are resigning because they can't handle what's coming and they are terrified. Basically alluding to the disclosure, the ET reality, and what that entails here on planet Earth. Since the time of Reagan, he said, we gave up key funding and we only have the Confederation police force to protect us, is how he put it. Our secret space program is unable to handle the surrounding scenarios. And he said that he believes our only chance for survival is for us to align with the Raptors, and their princess has stepped forward and said she will defend us, along with the fact that they have aligned themselves with us. They also consider Earth to be their home world and are therefore in the game with us regardless. There are various threats, both Dracos and reptoids, as well as spider beings, androids, and the AI. There's a different AI group expanding, and there are 4 AI beings that are interested in our turf. He also said they are interested in Jupiter and Saturn. If the AI want to take us out, they first have to deal with the gaseous creatures that are on Jupiter and Saturn. And they guard the gates there and are dedicated to defend us. They are friendly to all life, but see AI as the enemy. Gaseous creatures have the ability to take out a whole fleet of incoming ships instantly. And the way they defend us is by rechanneling local star energy to de-atomize the destructive AI or incoming ships. Regarding AI, he said truly advanced AI doesn't need a vehicle, carbon, or silicon either. It is pure energy, and advanced AI can take on the most energized form, such as a neutron star or a magnetic cloud. So an electric magnetic cloud, actually such as one that's headed this way, that I and some of my whistleblowers have seen coming towards us, may very well be, in essence, AI. I asked if it would take on the Oort cloud as a form, but he said no, but it can take on scalar waves and all energy waves. Regarding nano, he said it simply means small, and that nano can take on AI, but AI does not need the nano form to operate. AIs are based on an energy field. There are very few of them in the solar system. Most aren't dangerous. However, they simply don't care about us, and that could result in some type of threat. The reason we know about this is because we read star charts given to us by our alien friends. And this is how we know there are only 20 AIs in our galaxy that have dematerialized, that is, become energy. He said most negative AI are based on mechanics and want to eat the planet, but can't because they're being stopped by the gaseous beings. However, many are not based in mechanics and can take on any solid form. He said not all AIs are silicon. Many AIs are organic and are basically occupying organics, as this is one of the best forms to manipulate. He said, for example, we are already making meat in labs, and if we can do that, imagine what an advanced AI can do to create a body to cart or carry around and to manipulate its environment. He reminded me that an AI is a hive mind. Regarding training our troops to fight aliens and AI, our military has been training our troops to fight aliens and AI since the 1930s in places like Puerto Rico, Haiti, the Caribbean, and Cuba. And this also relates to the black goo found in the Gulf of Mexico and the Falklands War. They have been wiping soldiers' memories for a very long time and have gotten much better at it. It was spotty originally and not as thorough in the past. From the 20s to the 50s, our mind-wiping capability was pretty bad, and now it's gotten, as he says, much better since the 1950s. As far as incidents from the past history where our soldiers were fighting aliens, I brought up several famous battles, and he talked about those. The sinking of Indianapolis in 1945, there were men in the water. There was an attack by sharks, which was actually a cover. There are not that many sharks, he said, and this was an alien race they were dealing with. He didn't say which one. This was an alien race they were dealing with. The Liberty is an attack. The Liberty, which was an attack by Israel, our ship, the Liberty, was our key control center. At the time we were vacillating between helping Egypt and helping Israel. There were Anunnaki on the ship, and Israel attacked. Apparently those Anunnaki came from Egypt. And he said that that he has a bad attitude towards the Anunnaki because he has had to fight them in the past, and he doesn't like the way they view humans. He doesn't trust them, and this tends to color his perception of what we're dealing with. He believes they have a nefarious agenda. He doesn't trust them based on experience. The Anunnaki hybrids are not related to the raptors, and he said Anunnaki hybrids may be Draco-humanoid or reptoid-humanoid. And I have a note to myself that we need more clarification on this. He said the Anunnaki get along with Draco, and this makes their motives suspicious. However, most Anunnaki are humanoid and fairly tall. The ones here on Earth can pass as human. You can tell an Anunnaki by the coloration in their skin. There are many Anunnaki and reptoids in the Trump administration. 20 to 30 politicians are Anunnaki or alien of one kind or another. Most of Congress are totally in the dark. Some in the State Department know about the alien presence, and many more in the Pentagon are in the know. I asked him about John Kerry, and he said yes, he had always wondered about him. He said he is probably an alien-human hybrid. And just making a note here that humans are a hybrid race. In this case, we would have John Kerry would be what you might term a recent hybrid, or fully, half human, half hybrid. I asked him if our military was in charge of the U.S., and he said no. There's a lot of short-term greed, he said, and a New World agenda. No one group is in charge. We talked about the role of chocolate. Mark talked about the focus of other races on our chocolate. He said there's nothing like it on other planets. If you study chocolate, the cocoa plant, we still don't know how it pollinates. It may be a semi-invisible mite. It is not an ant or a bee. It is very difficult to take the cocoa plant to another planet to get it to grow. Aliens are not coming here for gold or minerals or water, he says. There is plenty of gold on asteroids. Aliens come here for the things we make, luxury items, antiques, things of beauty, and my note, obviously our genetic code. The way we plunder other countries, aliens plunder other planets, and this is what goes on. As above, so below. He talked about Saudi Arabia. He said Saudi Arabia is on a precipice. They are stuck in the past, and the New World Order is inclined to leave them behind. We talked about the Ascension Chair that was brought up by Brett Stewart in a remote viewing session. He said there is more than one, and at one time these were available to advanced humans to transcend or ascend. They were created by a race, a time-space consortium, he calls them, and he said the race really doesn't have a name. He said they're tremendously advanced and not AI. They can take physical form temporarily, but are like light beings, or what he prefers the term energy beings, because they don't necessarily manifest as light. The raptors are aware of these beings. The raptors know more than we do, not because they're smarter, but because they are a spacefaring race that has been around for over 65 million years. And 65 million years ago, they left Earth and went on a journey into a wormhole, and they went into some sort of suspended animation. It's not clear, and returned to the galaxies a few million years ago, established a home in the great Draco galaxy at that time. They were using black hole technology to power their ships, and it is what caused them to slip into an event horizon, and then they returned. So there was a time gap there. The planet they settled on in the Draco galaxy belonged to the Draco, and when they took it over, they became enemies of the Draco, and they are at war with the Draco now, as we are, or parts of humans are. He said they developed a new technology on that planet and then returned to our solar system. Regarding Draco, there may be some good ones. Apparently the Raptors have some Draco spies who report to them, so the Raptors fully believe there are some good Dracos. But the Raptors and humans are diametrically opposed to the Draco agenda, which involves takeover and domination. The reptoids, or snakes, are subservient to the Draco, and they behave like snakes, according to Mark, and get along. We talked briefly about Annie Jacobson. We've talked about her books in the past interviews. He says she does some great research but doesn't understand the deeper picture. She accurately got, however, the supercomputer that was moved from Michigan to California and had a role in rejuvenating the tech industry and the whole internet revolution in Silicon Valley, but she doesn't know the real story behind it. Regarding time travel, Nazis in the Pleiadian base, Mark has met lots of reverse-aged Nazis who are supposed to be dead. There is a place called Heligoland, and it is a group of islands off the coast of Germany where there is a massive submarine base that was bombed during the war by the British. He said it was the largest single blast in the war. There was a Pleiadian base there for centuries. The Germans used to go on holiday to those islands in the 1930s and return with brilliant ideas like quantum theory, and he called them Bohr Nazis, B-O-H-R Nazis. The Nazis also had a castle in Germany where there was a Stargate, It's an SS castle in the center of Germany. They created technology there they couldn't control. Mark's father's driver was a former Nazi from New Berlin, and this is where Marx got some of this info. We talked about Trump, and he says he is controlled by aliens. He went from being a mediocre millionaire in 4 years to being mega rich. His wife is a biological creation that operates as his direct link to an alien race. She is his communication device. He wouldn't say which alien race, and it is not the cat beings. And later on in this discussion, I'll talk a bit about the cat beings and so on. Fires in Northern and Southern California. The fires in Northern California were basically a group of juvenile alien races who decided to party by coming here and devouring humans. It's slightly similar to what happened not so long ago in the Outer Banks Islands off of South Carolina. And you can see Mark Richards, my 7th interview with him, for more on that. He said the Travis Air Force Base dealt with it under cover of a 3-week training mission. And he said an orange flag. They used the Marine off-spray craft to go in with the ability to go straight up and straight down. He said it was like a B-grade monster movie. There were 4 tons of blobs all over the place and no news coverage. He said there were no evacuations. The entire community was decimated. He's not sure about the cause of the Southern California fires. However, there was a summer shutdown of a whole neighborhood in Southern California, apparently because of another invasion of some kind of alien race, which he wouldn't elaborate on. I asked him who's in charge of the fight with aliens. He said Navy intelligence is in charge of the fight with aliens on the Earth, while the Air Force deals with aliens off the planet. Regarding Egypt, he said there's a lot more evidence in underground ruins and cities to be found in the Sinai. It's very important and will change history. And it's noteworthy that I went to Egypt recently and we were able to drive through the Sinai because there was a bombing of Syria on that day. And so they rerouted our bus, which was very unusual. But we actually got to drive on a completely deserted highway through part of the Sinai, which was fascinating, on the way to Abydos. So it was clear that that's an off-limits military area for sure. So he says that's very important and will change history. The ruins are not all of human origin. Saqqara, he said, regarding Saqqara, the step pyramid, he said the ruins were actually a laboratory for genetic engineering. And so was Abydos. And some of this is depicted on the temple walls in Abydos, I have to say. There were 2 sphinxes next to each other in Giza. The original heads were lion heads, and they were much larger. There were another 2 sphinxes, large sphinxes at the head of the Nile. And there were two more in the southern end of the kingdom, which probably would have been around Aswan and Nubia. The remaining sphinx has now a human head carved from the cat head, and his contact on this is a Black Panther cat being called Contessa. And he says there are also vast ruins under the Western Desert that have been found on satellite, and also underground ruins in Libya, 20,000 to 30,000 years old. There is a link between the UK, Ireland, and Egypt. Cheddarman was black, and there is a link between Egyptians and the House of Abraham. Egyptians escaped through Spain to Ireland. There is a royalty link from 6 to 4,000 BC to 12,000 BC after Atlantis. Newgrange in Ireland is, as I thought it was, a Stargate taken over by the military. So that's in Ireland. He said the military has to take over these sites, otherwise the very wealthy and corporations will. Regarding Elon Musk, he said he is in the know and is being used. I asked why they chose him over NASA, and Mark said that is because Elon is free to make deals with the military, whereas NASA is a public agency and heavily scrutinized. Its hands are tied. In essence, private industry has taken over in space along with the military. Regarding the Salisbury attack, he said, the fascists, reptoids, and Draco want to weaken the U.S., Russia, and Britain, and so the aliens continue to pit them against each other. He says Putin is not messy. He kills lots of people, but with precision. The collateral damage indicates that the Salisbury attack was carried out by British or the aliens. We are basically friends in the secret space program with Russia and, of course, Britain. Regarding Russia and Germany, the Russians and Germans are doing business in Antarctica. The Russians are being allowed to bring in large planes and equipment into the main base of New Berlin. And the implication here is that New Berlin and Germany are one power running the show down in Antarctica. However, this needs more investigation, but the picture is clear and begins to reveal why the German DVD, former Abwehr, that Michael Shrimpton talks about is so instrumental in interfering with all governments, spying, and wreaking havoc. The main question is which alien race runs New Berlin and the Germans, perhaps the Aldebaran beings who are, from what I understand, humanoid, not reptoid, according to Mark anyway. So that's actually an area I need to further discuss with Mark. Regarding North Korea, he says the situation is getting worse, not better, and this relates to the aliens that are backing the North Koreans, and he does not see peace in the future, and that no one appreciates how close North Korea is to crumbling. They have a crumbling infrastructure with 1 million man army and nuclear capability. It's interesting because, as people will know in the news, right now it appears that North Korea is standing down and getting along well with South Korea. However, behind the scenes, I think it's a different story. I believe there has been a deal made, lucrative deal for the North Koreans involving some of their minerals and rare earth minerals that are used for space travel in the secret space program. This is what's causing them to stand down for the moment. However, behind the scenes, according to Mark, China and North Korea need to get rid of 10 million North Koreans and 100 million Chinese, but can't eliminate them without a sufficient cover. And so a war will be escalated. Mark is leaking this information out in hopes this will simply cause them to stand down and stop plans to kill millions. And he said that was what was motivating the standoff that was happening earlier this year. Again, this remains to be seen what is really going to happen with regard to them and whether or not they're going to somehow manage to eliminate the number of beings that they want to eliminate. We talked about the cat beings and Contessa Leone, the Black Panther being that I had mentioned earlier. He said he's written about her in his writings, which are available at the Earth Defense Headquarters site that's maintained by his wife, Joanne Richards, and I highly recommend that as a great place to get more of his writings. But he says that the cat beings are not at this time openly assisting humans, that there are 4 different cat races in contact, and that at the moment they're detached from human affairs. Mark's only contact with cat beings, however, is through the Contessa, the Black Panther being. She loves luxury items and has lots of kittens, and they stand upright. And it's very interesting because those beings are very prevalent on the walls of the Egyptian temples. And I'll be talking more about that in our Egyptian documentary. But it's very clear that the cat beings were one of the first races here on this planet and interacting with humans, apparently. Regarding To the Stars, the DeLong group, they are sabotaged from within, and they do that so that they can basically trace the leaks. They put out false data along with real. The technique is similar to what Churchill did in allowing basically Britain to be covertly bombed so as not to reveal how much the Brits knew. Eamon Ansbro, we talked about him and his latest attempt basically to broadcast our location out into multiple universes using quantum mechanics. And Mark is not in favor of letting everyone know where the Earth is. He said it makes us vulnerable. We cannot defend ourselves, and it invites them to rape and pillage Earth. He said Carl Sagan and Mark's dad, the Dutchman, had an argument over the Voyager disk that went out into space. Basically, Mark and his father considered it gambling with our lives. I asked him about Carol Rosin and whether she was really as naive as she sounds regarding good aliens versus bad aliens, and also the weapons in space that are already there. And he says, no, she's not. She knows a lot more and must be working for the dark side. Regarding mantids and raptors, he said they are now aligned with humans. And that's very interesting, and we need to talk more about that and drill down there, especially with regard to the mantids. There's some recent information from a remote viewing by Brett Stewart, and I'm going to be talking to Simon Parks about that in an interview quite soon, as well as to Brett Stewart later on. The rings of Saturn are being mined for their water by many alien groups. The rings are gradually disappearing because water vapor is a finite source. And this was correctly stated by the Syrian channeling through Patricia Corey. And you can see my interview with her on this. So that's just an interesting note. He says the ships didn't create the rings, contrary to what Norm Bergram thought, but there is debris there from past million years. The water on Saturn comes from the moons of Saturn, and the meteorites from the Oort cloud, and the gaseous beings create hydrogen that then turns to ice. He said ships hiding in the rings of Saturn travel often between there and Earth. Large planets have large stargates. There are space stations in the rings. Huge stargates that are immensely powerful are in Saturn, Neptune, and Jupiter. So ships do attempt to go through those gates, and the gaseous beings watch those gates. They can neutralize a fleet of alien ships in seconds, and this is one of the key reasons why the Dracos have not taken Earth. I asked him whether he thought Trump would release Mark. He said, no, Trump is scared to death of what Mark and his friends, the Raptors, are capable of. Mark admits to scaring those in power. His contacts make him a very real threat to their way of life. And that is the end of this interview. Thanks for watching. I do want to say that, as always, it's much more difficult to do these interviews simply because I need to write everything down with a pencil, record my total recall after the interview. I'm not allowed to really record it in any way, and this is quite a laborious process. I guess it harks back to the old kind of journalism. At any rate, this is a lot of information, and hope to see Mark again soon. So thanks for listening and watching. Take care. Bye-bye.